we simulate the data in various locations, starting from the upstream up to the downstream. And 3 models were projecting increase in the future flow, while 2 were decreasing, and their margin in decrease were higher. This is due to the temperature increase that is incorporated in our model simulation. And for the flood inundation, we found that the downstream area is affected by the flood inundation, and areas around Lake Tana are also among the areas affected by the flood inundation. Considering this area is located at the downstream of the include that contribute. So our socioeconomic analysis, we stated this one for case, and one is average.
Dr. Gabert Sadi, your line is breaking. Can you check your internet connectivity?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead. Thank you.
Maybe, yeah, it's better.
Yes.
We turn off my video. Okay, so for socioeconomic impact analysis, we classify the hazard into 4 levels for risk category, depending on their depths of inundation. And we use the global human settlement layer to identify the inundation levels. And for the inundated area in the downstream area was, and in the rural area was higher, and also for up to 0.5 meter, and for affected people in urban areas were found to be higher for both cases. Okay, sorry. So
Yes.
Now we go to the summary and conclusion. So summary is projected climate change are classified qualitatively, and it is very likely that extreme rainfall and discharge will increase in the future. And uncertainty analysis indicated that synoptic scale climate variables connection with the precipitation projection in the study area, and flood inundation area will increase due to the change, and that will have direct and indirect impact on the socioeconomic indicators, including the GDP and also the other sectors like health and education. The result highlighted the need for adaptation strategies, including the beneficial use of reservoir to smoothen the projected temporal variability and extreme flow in the Blue Nile Basin. And our recommendation or message for deepening the Nile cooperation are understanding of climate change risks and the anticipated socioeconomic impact of extreme flows for evidence-based decision-making in the Eastern Nile Basin, and promoting transparency in the negotiation, including the risk posed by climate change, and the beneficial use of water storage structures, such as the GERD, for equitable development, and utilizing existing partnerships, such as the Nile Basin Initiative and agreements such as the Declaration of Principles and the CFA, to deepen the water use and development and enhance the multilateral development in this basin. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll stop my presentation here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gabert Sadiq, for this informative and excellent presentation. The presentation was about assessment of climate change impact for sustainable development and disaster risk reduction in the Blue Nile. And here you look at the case study for the BI or for the Blue Nile. And also you went through the vulnerability, the scarcity, and the inadequacy. And also, like you used the different land surface data and also gauge data, and you use this tool of CMF5 from DIAS. And also the selection of the GCMs here, you selected like 4 models from RCP 8.5, the representative concentration pathway, and the period it was centered around 2035. You looked also at the trends of extreme rainfall and also the projected extreme trend. And also you made the analysis for uncertainty because there was that level of uncertainty, and the good thing, you didn't use only one GCM here because of the uncertainty. You used the different ensemble members. And also you looked at the wind vectors. You made that analysis, and here you looked at the wind at 850 hectopascal, and this is the low-level wind. There is low-level wind, there is African easterly jet, there is the tropical easterly jet at different levels. Here you look at the wind at the low level at 850, and also you look at the connection with SSTs in the Indian Ocean. This Indian Ocean dipole and the positive and negative Indian Ocean dipole. You looked at the sea surface temperature over the Pacific Ocean, this El Nino and La Nina, and the impact. And you found that 3 models, they projected that there will be like an increase, and 2, there was like a decrease. And you looked also at the socio impact analysis. And finally, you came up with some conclusion or recommendation related to the extreme rainfall and how it will increase, and the uncertainty analysis, how you analyze this uncertainty, and how the flood inundation will be increased, and also the recommendation also to understand these climate changes and to promote transparency in negotiation and to utilize the available or the current partnership. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Gebrsadik, for this informative and excellent presentation. Now, maybe you can unshare your PPT, please. Now we can go to our next presenter, Dr. Magdalene, and her presentation is about flooding in Norway, August 2023, lessons and reflections. Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll play a video from our side here.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be joining you here today. I would like today to take you through an event which we had in the past 3 weeks of a storm that have hit Norway, Sweden, and the Baltic region due to a storm named Hans, and take that as an example that no place in the world is safe from climate change. If you could please kindly share the video.
Yes, we'll share the video from our side, and there is an advert at the beginning. You can stop sharing, please. And maybe for our participants, please ignore the advert. It is not from our side. It is just we are playing this video online. So there is a small advert.
Norway and the dam at a disused hydroelectric power plant is overwhelmed. Eastern Norway and the dam at a disused hydroelectric power plant is overwhelmed. It's thought the floodgates failed to open and the river Glomma, swollen by the torrential rains brought by Storm Hans, spilled over the top. Up to 20 homes downstream had to be evacuated.
Siste nytt jo at elva fortsetter å stige, men vi jobber med de samhandlingsaktørene som vi har fått med oss for å bistå oss her. Vi vet ikke hva vi faller på ennå, men det I hvert fall evakueringen vi godt I gang med, og de blir ivaretatt av politi og kommune.
The storm's impact has been felt across swathes of Norway and Sweden. Floodwaters have washed away bridges, turned roads into rivers and uprooted homes, casting them adrift and turning them into driftwood.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. Yes, like I said, we are every place in the world is affected by climate change. I would like to take you very briefly through the climate change census report from 2023, whereby is, as we can see, all the different parts of the world and regions of the world are affected by an increasing temperatures, including the Northern European region, where I am currently staying and living. The temperature rise is being felt across the globe, and as well as the increase in precipitation across the globe. I come from Sudan. I have lived in Norway for 15 years, and it has been an unprecedented, the extreme weather conditions and the extreme rainfalls have been recurring very much in the last 5 to 7 years in a way that I have not experienced before the start of my when I first moved to Norway. You could see clearly that you could feel clearly there is an increase in precipitation and an increase also in the snow melting and the patterns of snow melting, and how it has been changing as to like it's becoming sooner and sooner that the snow melts. This changes the whole hydrological cycle, the hydrological regime, and the ecosystem. So as the first speaker have mentioned, it's not just about the amount of precipitation coming or the amount of snow melting, but what time it is happening. That has also been an impact that is compounded on the impact of climate change. The agricultural and ecological droughts, perhaps in my region, Northern European region here, is not being conclusive. However, what is very conclusive from the report is that the parts of the world with increasing agricultural and ecological drought, like Africa, these parts are where most of the agricultural production is happening. So a failure in the production on agricultural season in Africa, in Asia, has a more devastating impact on the world rather than one, for example, in Northern Europe, since agriculture in Northern Europe is not as much as in the south. And then I have taken parts of the findings of the report, and there are basically two different scenarios for global change. A low scenario, which is highlighted here by the gray shaded area, and that predicts an increase. First of all, this data is compared to increase in temperature from 1850 to 1900 globally. So if you see the black line, the black curve here is observed temperature 1850 to 1900, whereas the gray area is a low emission of greenhouse gases scenario that can lead to to an increase in temperature between 0.5 and up to 2.5 temperature rise. And this is only a low emission scenario. With a high emission scenario, which is more realistic scenario, then we go into the pink shaded area, and that's an increase between 3 to 5 degrees in temperature globally. And that's, like I said, it's a more realistic scenario. However, with an intermediate scenario, and that is the orange curve, we will still be a little bit under 3 degrees in temperature rise. The report goes further into explaining the compound impact of incremental increase in temperature. In 2014, the IPCC have, if you see the figure here, you could see that it is divided into different color schemes, from moderate to very high. In 2014, scientists have thought that possibly an increase in temperature by, for example, 1.5% will give a moderate risk and reason for concern. Whereas today, considering how more sophisticated methods and more findings, and we understand more the complexity of climate change, and we understand more today what a 1 degree rise in temperature could mean, we could see that it has moved for the same amount, the same 1.5 degree increase in temperature has moved from a region, a color scheme of moderate reason for concern to being a high to very high reason for concern. And this is across all of them. This figure here, I think it's a warning sign, because with more understanding, with better measurements, and with more research and science, we understand now in 2022 better than in 2014 what is the real impact of climate change. And we are still doing so, and we're still finding out, and still scientists are working, and the picture doesn't look very well. The global reasons for concern are increasing with the increasing increment of temperature, increasing increment of greenhouse gases. Now we have all, for very many years, have been saying that global change, climate change is happening, and it has consequences, and it has a cost, and so on. But how do we actually ensure that the weather and the climate information is adequately considered in decision making? First of all, we need to address the matter. As scientists, we need to address the matter in a more practical way, and to try to address in more economic terms and health terms, rather than in just general terms. What is the potential climate-related impact on our economies, societies today, and over the coming decades? How can we best manage, and what options do we have? What investments will be required to fund these measures, and will the benefits of these investments outweigh the costs? What we need actually is a climate-resistant economy. That has been defined by the capacity to survive successfully and adapt and prosper in the face of change and uncertainty related to disturbances, whether that be caused by resource stresses, societal stresses, or acute weather and climate-related events. What we're trying to sell here as scientists is an economic resilient economy, such that it is considered by the decision makers. we need to provide decision makers on local and national scales with the facts and methods necessary to design and execute an adaptation strategy for natural hazards in a changing climate in a robust and replicable way. Rigorous risk management approaches to assess and quantify risk today, additional to risk due to socioeconomic development and climate change, and rigorous risk management approach to the purpose and praise and prioritize the basket of adaptations measures to address weather and climate risks on an economic basis. We want to see what if we don't act fast enough. There is going to be an increase in global warming, and losses and damages will rise, and additional human and natural systems will reach adaptation limits. Risk of cost escalation, lock in the infrastructure, stranded assets, and reduced facility and effectiveness of adaptation and mitigation options. An increase in the projected adverse impacts in Africa, Central and South America, Asia, and the Antarctic, and will be disproportionately affect the most vulnerable population. And here I would like, this last point, I would like to highlight it and underscore that no place on Earth is safe from climate change. As I have seen in the example from Norway, I just would like to say a few shocking statistics. There is a flood in Norway, which has a population of 5.5 million, which is very similar to the population of Libya, which is 6.7 million. The number of people who died in the storms of Norway and the floods of Norway, which I have shown at the beginning of my presentation, are 2 people. 2 people have died in that flooding. In Libya, the latest estimate is 4,000 people confirmed dead and 5,000 missing. This is the latest estimate. The cost for the storm in Norway is estimated to be 1.5 million euros. Now the cost, the economic cost of the floods in Libya, I don't have figures and statistics for it yet, but what I do know is that that 1.5 million euros, that all houses will be compensated, that the insurance companies, the banks, and the government, they work together. There are funds for there are enough funds for adverse situations and conditions like this one, and people are already in compensation and rebuilding just 2 weeks after the flooding. That be on the private households or the infrastructure that was damaged. Within 6 months, the government has set up a plan with the private sector, with the insurance companies, and with the banks, that the impacts of this flood will be dealt with in a matter of 6 months. I am in good authority to say that the Libyan population and the Libyan people possibly will not have the same kind of compensation and funds and plans to set in a place in time to be able to adapt to such extreme changes. So therefore, my last sentence here, which was that it will be the most vulnerable populations will pay the costs. And this is underscored by the 2 examples of flooding happening in Libya and a flooding happening in the north in Norway, and how differently the people have felt the impact of climate change in these 2 countries. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Magdalene, for this excellent and informative presentation. And the presentation, it was about the experience in Europe and how flooding in Norway, August 2023, and you shared with us lessons and reflections. Thank you for sharing that experience. And you started and ended with an important statement that no place is safe around the world from climate change. This is a very important statement. And also you went through like the increase recently in precipitation in North Europe, also the snow melting. And you looked also at the devastation. You look at that message of devastation in Africa and Asia in crop, and how is that devastation? It is more compared to Europe. And also you looked at the global surface temperature, and you compare it with the pre-industrial period. This is 1850 to 1900, the pre-industrial period. And also you look at the risk and impact and the complexity on climate change, or the complexity from the climate change, and the questions which imposed by decision makers. And the important thing here is climate resistant economy, and also enabling climate resilient development economy related to this climate adaptation. And also the need for acting fast. We need to act fast, like in terms of mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation, of course, it is related to the reduction of these greenhouse gases. Adaptation, this is normally what we do here also in Africa. We are trying to adapt more with the climate change. And the need also for like this quick and fast response. That is an important message. And also you made that comparison between with the two countries, one in North Europe and one in Africa, with the same population, with the same almost extreme event, and the casualties in Norway, which are like almost people died and thousands died in Libya. And also the insurance, the advanced insurance, and the quick compensation in North Europe compared to what is happening in Africa. And again, finally, that important message about no place on Earth is safe from climate change. Thank you again for this informative presentation, Dr. Magdalene. Maybe you can stop sharing. Thank you very much. Now we can go to Engineer Elise from DHI, and her presentation is about use of global hydrological model to better understand flow dynamics in Senegal River Basin. Please, you can share your presentation, Elise from DHI. Introduce yourself well first, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
So thank you. So my name is Elise Uzey, and I'm working as engineer on flood and water resource management at DHI. So DHI is a major consultancy company where we work on all issues related to water, and it can go from water resource management to urban flood resilience and marine and coastal environment. And at DHI, so we are committed to accelerate the use of digital solutions for sustainable future of water. And this morning, I will present you an example of how we use DHI Global Hydrological Model on a large river basin, which is the Senegal River Basin. So the DHI Global Hydrological Model was developed and applied to analyze and understand the water availability globally and locally. It gives an hydrological assessment in area where there is very few ground data and where water can be a main issue, which is usually the case in large African basin. And the fact that this model was developed globally makes it highly robust to serve as a basis for local and detailed assessments for flood and water resource management. So how it works? So we used global datasets such as topography, land use, rainfall, to define input data for the model. So the model has two main components. The first component is one distributed rainfall runoff model, and the second component is a routing model. So the rainfall runoff model is defined on a grid with 0.1 degree resolution, and the NAM model is applied to calculate runoff based on rainfall and evapotranspiration. And then the flow is routed to the sea through hydrological catchments using the kinematic wave model. And the output of the model are total runoff, river flows, and soil moisture, for example. And an important thing is that the model was applied globally, so it covers the whole globe. The input datasets used are all based on globally available data. So for example, we used the SRTM digital elevation model. We used MODIS land use dataset and also ISRIC soil grid datasets. And the parameters of the hydrological model were calibrated based on the judging station all around the globe. And then for unjudged catchments, regionalization method was applied to define the parameters. So we applied this model on the Senegal River Basin. And so in this basin, we can see the combined impact of climate change, urban development, and economic development, which makes the hydrological regimes less and less predictable. So we can see an increase in the frequency of unpredictable events, such as floods and droughts, which can affect the population and economic activities. So in this basin, apart from the three main tributaries of Senegal River, all other unjudged catchments are not very well known. And we use this tool to improve the knowledge on flow dynamics and volume for all unjudged catchments. And the results from the model were used to propose some new infrastructure to improve the resilience against flood and drought events. So we started from the global model and we extracted a local hydrological model around the Senegal River Basin. And the parameters from this model were calibrated based on local judging station to make sure that results will fit the basin. In order to make this tool durably used by Senegal River Basin Organization and also all the member states, we also developed an online platform to make all results available. So using this tool, every user can display some flow time series anywhere in the river basin. We have simulated 20 years from historical datasets, And this long-term simulation was used to quantify daily, monthly, and annual flows in the basin. And it was also used to make a flood frequency analysis to assess flood return periods. But we could also derive some more application from this tool. So, for example, we use it to design some mitigation measures against floods. We can also use it to improve navigation by designing new infrastructures or optimizing the existing ones. We can also use it to better understand the water availability in the basin and to manage water resource better. We can also use it to quantify the impact of climate change on water resource, because in this example, we only use it with historical data, but we can also run some simulation based on various carbon emission scenarios to assess and quantify the impact of climate change on river flows. And also we can use it to implement real-time and forecast application, which can go from a few days to up to 9-month forecast. So this tool is a very powerful tool because it can be used to help improving the knowledge on data scarce area, because the fact that it was globally calibrated makes it applicable anywhere in the globe. It can also be a starting point for more comprehensive solution. So for example, we also use it in Kenya to assess the impacts of climate change locally. And we also use it on a global scale to assess the transport of plastic pollutants from the source to the ocean. So it makes it a very flexible and agile tool, which can be included in a more comprehensive solution. So as a conclusion, we can say that this digital solution can be used to compensate the lack of ground data, and then help to better improve water resource, which can be for dealing with floods or also dealing with droughts. We can also, it can also be very efficient to better understand the impact of climate change anywhere on a basin or globally. And also it gives all the necessary framework to easily implement early warning solution to manage flood and droughts. So that was all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Elise, for this excellent and informative presentation. It was about this state-of-art tool about use of global hydrological model to better understand flow dynamics in Senegal River Basin. And you took us through the methods for this DHI tool, this global hydrological model. And also you took us through the global data set you are using in this model. And also this distributed NAM model, which is embedded inside, and also the value added also of using this model, and also different global free data as an input to this model, like remote sensing data, soil, DM, and other data set. and how the model was used in Senegal. And now it is an online platform for the result. And also it has like a different kind of application, and how this tool is powerful in data scarce area. This is very important. Normally we face this problem of scarce data here in our region. And also how flexible and agile is this tool. And as you said, how it compensates the lack of data. This is an important message. This tool can compensate the lack of data and also assess the impact of climate change. And also it is very useful in the implementation of early warning system. Thank you very much again, Engineer Elise, for this informative and excellent presentation. Now we can go to our next presenter, Ms. Livia from FAO, and the presentation is about FAO's this vapor open access tool for monitoring land and water productivity in agriculture. Thank you very much. Please first introduce yourself well, and the floor is yours. Thank you again, Ms. Livia.
Thank you. Good morning all. So I'm Livia Peiser. I work as a technical officer in the Land and Water Division of the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. And yes, I will be presenting one of the tools that we use and that we recently developed in FAO to support adaptation to climate change, among other things. So I'll well, let me first start by saying, so in the short presentation, this 10 minutes or so, I'll just briefly touch on why the Food and Agriculture Organization is working this topic. So why water and foods are related to climate change, particularly in the Nile Basin context. What is the FAO Vapor Open Access Tool, and some examples of how it has been used in the Nile Basin in this topic. First, let me just mention that I'm very happy to be here today because FAO and the Nile Basin Initiative have a long history of collaboration. So just mentioned that back in 2011, there was I think a very important project collaboration between FAO and the Nile Basin Initiative, and we developed a set of information products that are still available for reference if you're interested in that. And but that of course brings me to why FAO is why food and agriculture and water are so much related these days. And this can be easily, let's say, unfortunately, captured in a few figures from the FAO flagship publications. The Status of Food Insecurity says that over 828 million people still suffer from hunger. This figure is growing in the last years, after a few years of overall decrease. So this figure is growing more because of climate change and conflicts. And at the same time, 3.2 billion people live in areas with a high to very high water shortage. And we know that agricultural production needs to grow globally by 50% by 2050 because of population growth and economic development. And also, it is clear that most of the increase in cropland, or 85% of the increase in cropland, is in under irrigated circumstances. So that puts additional pressure on water resources and water used in agriculture. And at the same time, agriculture is suffering mostly from climate change impacts, and we see the impact on the food security. So that means that we need to find ways of growing more food using less water, and this is what in FAO and in general in the global agenda we refer to as water productivity. That is the amount of agricultural output per unit of water consumed. That is a measure that combines land and water productivity. Unfortunately, measuring these two variables is not easy. This picture here shows a flow meter in the Nile Basin in one of those countries, and I won't say which one. And it's an example of how not to measure flow in an irrigation canal, and that's why remote sensing is useful. It's not replacing, of course, ground observation, field measurements. Absolutely, this is not the point, but it's a very good complement, a cost-effective way of complementing ground data, particularly if we need to monitor things over time and over large areas. That makes it very difficult to do only with ground data. Satellite help us doing that because we can monitor both the biomass and through that estimate yields, and also the water consumption, so the evapotranspiration of vegetation. Technology is there. I mean, several algorithms have been developed and tested over time for measuring these two variables, and FAO has now, since 8 years, started developing an operational and open access methodology to calculate and distribute this data openly to the public. So we with the support initially of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, but now several other donors joined the effort, and in collaboration with IHE Institute in the Netherlands and the International Water Management Institute of CGIAR, and in partnership also with the ELIF company, we take data, open access data, satellite data, and calculate key land and water variables that help us produce indicators related to water productivity and also water accounting. The data is distributed freely on the FAO Vapor platform in near real time. So every 10 days, there's new data on biomass and evapotranspiration, in addition to agroclimatic parameters such as reference ET that is now based on AGIRA 5 from Copernicus, and precipitation from CHIRP. So this helps us put in context the data that we are looking at. I just wanted to mention, because it was, I think it's important in the topic of today's webinar, that now in version 3, we will also introduce a beta, so a draft, let's say beta product of relative soil moisture in the root zone that is particularly helpful for, I think, monitoring agricultural drought. That was the topic of the first keynote. So we release this data at different levels of resolution because they can be used for different purposes. So we have a 300-meter resolution, a global coverage that will be launched on the 4th of October, so in 2 weeks. At the moment is only Africa and the Near East, but it will be global. But anyway, for the Nile Basin, it's already there, and the Nile Basin is covered 100-meter resolution. And we also have selected irrigation schemes at 20-meter resolution, 30 or 20, depending on the area. In the Nile Basin, we have a number of them in Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, and soon, hopefully also in Kenya. This is one example of how the high resolution data looks like. With that level of detail, we can get to the level of monitoring water consumption at field level. So then of course, in partnership with local institutions, we collect also data on crop type so that we can understand the water productivity of specific crops in an irrigation scheme and come up with solutions and suggestions to improve water productivity at field level. I'll just quickly go through some applications that are, I think, relevant to the discussion of today. So the data, because we monitor biomass in near real time, we can use it to assess the impact of climate change. So the data, satellite data in particular, cannot be easily used for measuring, let's say, climate change because of the short time frame of that. Our data starts in 2009, so it's not enough for long for time series, but it can be used to monitor the impact. So in this case, we see an example of a rain-fed area in Somalia And those two lines that you see show the accumulated biomass in the agricultural season. So because we have decadal data, you can really select the agricultural season of interest and see how one season on the left was 2018, that would be a normal year, and how the 2019 is instead early during the growing season, shows a serious great decrease in biomass accumulation. So you can already see how and have assessments of the reduction of biomass by the end of the season. So it's a useful early warning tool. If you look at then at the time series, I just took it yesterday because the last data is from the first decade of September. That shows that unfortunately that same area is witnessing a continuous decrease of biomass development over time. So the start of the line is 2020, and then you see that 2021 is really lower, and 2022 didn't go any better. So that's more of a longer time series. I just mentioned that in the Nile Basin, the IHE Delft used the vapor data to calculate the water accounting plus, that is water accounting based on remote sensing. The report is available on the website. The data is also useful to monitor expansion of irrigated area. This animation shows a very known example of expansion of irrigated area in southern Egypt. But I'll also like to make an advertisement here and let you know that there's another webinar, WR2, on 28 September, in which a presentation on application of vapor data in Sudan in the Jazeera irrigation scheme will be presented. So if you're interested, join that session as well. And I'll just to mention that we have an applications catalog where we try to collect data and examples of how other partners, third parties are using our data. So things that we have not contributed to, but we just like to show how the data is being used in general in the world. So WRI, for example, used the data to develop their water risk maps in Ethiopia. IHE Delft again used the data for calculating a drought observed. So it's a drought monitoring system that is based on a Google Earth Engine, because the data can also be retrieved through Google Earth Engine. And for example, Future Water using it for assessing, for delivering advisory services to small scale farmers in Uganda and Rwanda, I think. So these are all examples of other people using the data in the Nile Basin that might be of interest. So I'll just conclude with one last slide about some resources that are available for users. So the data, as I mentioned, is accessible by also through API, which makes it easy for easier integration into existing web platforms or smartphone application or anything of the like. We have open codes and algorithms that can be accessed. A wiki page, the link is there that explains in detail the complex methodology behind it. There's also a Python version of it that you can test wherever you're interested in, and changing also parameters if you wish. So there's online courses and, as I mentioned, a catalog of applications. So two examples of these resources: one, an online course by IHE Delft on vapor concepts and validation that is still ongoing. I mean, you can register at any time. And also, if you're interested in this topic, please join the online vapor hackathon that will start in October. And you can find all the information on the website that is linked there, and or email to vapor@fao.org. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Livia, for this informative and excellent presentation. And also thank you for sharing the experience of FAO for our region here. And the presentation, it was about FAO's vapor open access tool for monitoring land and water productivity in agriculture. And first, you started with the long collaboration between FAO and NBI, and also the water productivity in agriculture, and the challenges for measuring the water needed for these agricultural projects, and also the use of remote sensing to complement the ground or the in situ data. And then you took us through the operational accessible data of FAO with different organizations, and also how you are producing different data, and some of them, they are near real-time data, and also the beta products related to soil moisture. We are expecting that very soon with different resolutions, 300, 100, and also very high resolution, up to 20 meter. And also you gave us example of application on how to use this tool in climate change as a climate change tool also, and the usefulness of this tool as an early warning tool, and how you can see the biomass development, and how this tool, it was used also over the Nile Basin, and the application catalog, and how is it also used in Africa in general. And finally, the valuable resources for users. You provided us with the valuable resources for the users here in our region, but also for all our participants. Thank you again for this informative presentation. Now we have another two important presentation. I will present one of them, and then Dr. Kevin will present the last presentation. Thank you very much. Yes. So this presentation, this is just a quick presentation about NBI climate proofing manual. At NBI, we developed a climate proofing manual for large infrastructures. This is like a report or a manual we managed to produce on how to climate proof the large infrastructures here in the region. And the main objective, it was provide guidance on a process that enables the integration of climate change in planning, designing, and also operating water infrastructure in the Nile Basin. In other words, also to climate-proof new and existing infrastructure investment processes and projects. And the target groups here, these are policymakers from government agencies, also regulators, financial institutions, infrastructure owners and managers, and also technical officers. And the outline or the chapters of this climate proofing manual. And as I said, it showed you clearly in step-by-step how to climate proof the existing infrastructure or the planned infrastructure. It has an introduction with like a kind of scope, definition, and target groups, and also conceptual foundation of climate risk, and also climate proofing step-by-step instructions, and also climate proofing and project cycle management. how to climate proof during the whole process of the project cycle, and also some annexes. We used like some case studies from Nile Equatorial Lake investment program for this manual. And here, as I said, we focused on the physical assets and on these physical infrastructures, and how to ensure the serviceability related to food security, to energy supply, and also related to flood protection, and also ensure the structural and operational integrity of infrastructure for a sustainable service provision under climate change condition. How we can ensure sustainable service provision. And here we try to look how to attain resilient structure and service delivery. And we look on two important areas: how to reduce exposure and how to reduce also the vulnerability. And as I said, we went through different processes for each cycle during the project implementation. We look at the scoping, at the risk assessment, at the risk treatment, and also monitoring and evaluation. These are different step-by-step guidance in this climate proofing manual. We're supposed to disseminate this manual very soon, within the coming 2 weeks. We are planning to disseminate this climate proofing manual here for the Nile Basin. It contains also core focuses on how to carry out climate risk assessment, how to make a climate risk assessment for different components for your large infrastructures, and how to calculate the climate risk. And as I said, these are different cycles of the project, starting from policy plans and regulation and the identification of the project, and also project preparation, and also resource mobilization and construction of the project, and also operation and maintenance of the existing infrastructure. So how to climate proof your large infrastructure during this life cycle of the project. So we gave a detailed guidance on how to climate proof. As I said, what you need to consider in each phase of this project cycle, what you need to consider in terms of policies, in terms of project framing and project specific site, and also visibility study during the visibility study, and also the climate change and asset management and insurance scheme, and the operational procedures of construction, and also what to consider in climate change in operational procedure and maintenance schemes. And these are different things, as I said, related to scoping, to risk assessment, to risk treatment, and monitoring and evaluation, and how to mainstream climate risk management into each phase of the investment process. The manual provides these key things, the climate proofing is not an isolated process. It is to be embedded within governance frameworks of infrastructure investment. Also, climate proofing can be done for new infrastructure investment and for existing infrastructure, and the scope and the method for risk assessment and how risk is treated depends on the objective and context of climate proofing, such as the different stages of infrastructure investment. And finally, ideally, the methods applied to accomplish climate proofing. And here, for example, risk assessment or risk treatment And also there are complementary materials provided in our IKP. This is our official website, ikp.nilebasin.org. You will find also hopefully valuable information related to these 4 components. We have a web-based climate proofing manual. It is a digitized manual. We also have climate scenarios database. We have bias-corrected data, and we have climate scenarios database in our IKP. We also have a third component related to PIVC Practitioners Network. This is a global network. You can also access that global network and leverage also the global experience also on this field. And finally, we have an e-learning course in this climate proofing. So that e-learning course, it can take you through different processes. These are these different components which I mentioned now, these 4 components. Thank you very much. Maybe we can go now for our final presenter, Dr. Wheeler from University of Oxford, and his presentation is about safety, is number 1, critical dam coordination during flood operations. Dr. Kevin Wheeler, please introduce yourself well, and the floor is yours, Dr. Kevin Wheeler. Thank you very much. I would like to thank also Dr. Kevin. He is joining us now from United States, and it is almost, I think now it is 1 a.m. in his side, but he was keen to share with us his experience. And he is always supportive in this Nile Basin Development Forum. Thank you very much, Dr. Kevin. The floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Bazadar. It's an honor to speak with you again and have this opportunity. And I don't mind staying up late at night to have that chance. What I want to do today is just have a quick talk, not on research, but just on some thought ideas to be able to think through what really matters as we're facing climate change, one of many things, but focusing on critical dam coordination during flood operations. Now, it's not a surprise through the literature that lots of evidence points towards more frequent, large peak flows in the Nile Basin. Dr. Gebrtsadik alluded to that as well. But a lot of research has been done that we often don't know if there'll be more or less water, but we have a good sense that there could be large spikes or large peak flows. So just this one paper recently from Takaru et al. Would indicate that at the same peak flow, the black line at the bottom is our base period. At the same peak flow, you may get these more often. So, for example, I look at this and I think it looks like from what was a 100-year flood event can now be every 15 or 30-year type event. And then higher extremes as well as more frequent. And evidence seems to have been playing out in the last several years, particularly in Sudan, flooding of the Nile into Khartoum and into the surrounding communities along the Blue Nile, mainly coming from the Ethiopian highlands, but also flooding coming from deluges in the wadis as well. So there's lots of dams that are in construction or exist or in construction along the Blue Nile, the Sennar Rosaries and the Gerd under construction now. Other dams that are potentially conceived for the future, Mandaya Dam, Biko Abu Dam, and then a Karadobi Dam further upstream potentially. So a large series of dams that offer opportunity as well as risk. I often say that dams create the infrastructure, they reduce risk, but if they're not managed well, they can create risk. So the key is how are they managed well? And then downstream of all these dams, of course, is the city of Khartoum, at the confluence. So I'm going to talk about two quick aspects. So one major aspect is developing normal and expected operation protocols and what to do during flooding events and why this is critical. Well, hydropower dams such as the GERD and some of the potential Ethiopian dams upstream, they're really operated they're designed to operate pretty full to maximize that hydropower head. So under one particular operation that we look at, really the goal is to try to keep it as full as possible to be able to maximize that electricity. Now, a lot of the negotiations have focused on the aspect of what happens during droughts. And that is a significant concern to think through. But normal operations, the dams will be running very full. And so what happens when those large floods come through there, and making sure that there are plans on how those floods can be operated or can be managed well through the dams. And with climate change, these flooding being more severe, those plans are very, very important to have in place. So again, the dams are intended to run full or nearly full most of the time. Now, here's a typical scene in a flood operations center for the Lower Colorado River Authority, which is a river in actually in Texas, not a different Colorado River, but it experiences major floods. And really, when it becomes flood stage, it's an all hands on deck. Everybody, it's 24/7. People are in the offices monitoring the sequence of dams all the way down these rivers to make sure they're being managed carefully, meticulously during the flooding conditions. It's a very serious time. The dams are designed very well, but it's a very difficult task to manage it and to make sure information is transferred from dam manager to dam manager of exactly what is happening. So a flood operations center functioning during these flooding times. And they produce these regular reports, flood operations reports, that'll provide information over the last period of time. So current or historical reservoir levels, what are the recent releases, and then importantly, what are the expected releases in the next period of time over the turbines or spillways on a daily or even hourly basis. What are they planning on releasing from one dam into the next dam? It's a very, very careful, meticulous operation that has to happen to get through these flooding events safely. So there's major information requirements. Each reservoir operator must know how much water to expect in the coming days. This is critical information just from a technical sense, no matter where you are in the world, to understand how to manage the dams. So continuous reporting forecasting. So it may look like this. You have a period of time in the past, and then you have today's operation, we'll say it's at 0, and then you have some projected operation, say 10 days out. And then the goal is to provide a report that shows a little bit of the past and what's going to happen, what they plan on doing into the future in the next 10 days or so. These aren't legally binding, but they're technical plans to be able to put forth into the public and for the next dam downstream. And after some period of time, that report has to be redone. So after a day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever, they have to redo that report again to say, okay, what is the next 10-day plan? How much do we follow that plan? But really continuously updating that plan on a daily or on a regular basis. And that's done over and over again during a flood operation period. So very, very critical. It's not a one-time report. It's a continuous reporting process that goes on. And really the frequency of reporting increases with the risk. So as the flooding time is at hand, that reporting has to become almost continuous or regular, at least daily. And then as the risk goes down, the type of reporting can get extended, or the frequency would lower. The other aspect to talk about is developing emergency protocols. What happens if there is some sort of a dam failure or if there is an overtopping? We've seen in dams in California having problems with their spillways during major flooding times. Dams are typically very safe structures. However, things do happen. So developing emergency protocols is absolutely critical. So there's always a risk of inundation downstream of all these dams. It's about a 2 to 4 day travel time from the GERD to Khartoum. The flood would the time it would take for a flood to reach that, and obviously large populations would have to move if there was a flood risk. There's been a lot of analyses of flood inundation risks, and I won't get into all the differences between them, but it's something to consider. Not saying that there's massive safety issues with the dams, but it's important to understand that there's always a need to have response plans in place. So one dam break analysis that was recently published does show a fairly wide swath of potential inundation if and when there would be a dam failure at the GERD and passing through the Rosaires Reservoir and on downstream. There's several of these studies out there. They differ in terms of what the impact is, but it's important to recognize that there's always a risk. Is this necessary? Absolutely. Flood warning systems are necessary regardless of the quality of the dam. There has to be a plan in place if something were to happen. Again, it's not saying that something will happen, but something good engineering would say that there always should be a plan in place. Communication hotlines to the downstream dam operators. Notification of potentially affected population centers, making sure information gets provided to those cities downstream that there's a flood coming potentially. Siren systems along the river channel. The city I live in right now, the siren goes off once a week to test it out to make sure that it's working in case there is a flash flood coming down. Emergency response plans. How do you move that many people away from the inundation areas when you only have a couple of days to do that? That has to be taken very, very seriously. And then measurement systems to track how a flood wave is propagated. So these are very, very practical measures that would help that helps build the resiliency of the populations to potential increases in flooding or potential risks as a result of catastrophic flooding or failures. So whose responsibility is this? Is a major question. Is it the upstream countries? Is it the downstream countries? Is the Nile Basin Initiative or subsequent entities? So my action item summary here: 2 flood-related requirements for responsible dam management protocols that include regularly updated short-term operation plans. So one dam knows what the next dam is going to do at all times, particularly during flooding periods, and dam flooding or failure early warning systems and response plans put into place. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kevin, for this excellent and informative presentation. And also thank you for always sharing your knowledge and information during this Nile Basin Development Forum. And the presentation, it was about critical dam coordination during the flood operation. And it is a very informative presentation. You talked about the increased climate extremes and that recent paper, and also the recent flood in Sudan, and also the current and future dam in sequence, opportunities they are offering, and also maybe they can also bring risk. It is not always opportunity, but we try to go, of course, direction of opportunities and to avoid bringing risk, and also develop good or normal dam operation, kind of rules. And also what happened during the drought, that critical period. And in the past 2 months, the water levels or the flows in Sudan, they were below 1984. That was the most critical drought, and the water levels and discharges, they were below those 1984. And also the flood operation, you mentioned several things related to the flood operation. And also the major information requirement and the need also for continuously update and report. And that is very important, this continuous update and report, and also develop emergency protocols. And also you shared with us like some examples of dam break analysis and also what may happen, and the importance of the flood warning system. And finally, like you stressed on protocol, like also and the regularity in updating this. And finally, like this dam early warning and the related information to that thing. Thank you again very much, Dr. Kevin, for this informative presentation. And I can see all our panelists, they answered all the questions from the participants. There was one question for me, I didn't answer that one. It is this tool is this tool used during the construction of big infrastructure such as GERD or service dam expansion? And if so, to what degree it will enhance for the future infrastructure in the pipeline? Yes, actually this tool, we are planning to disseminate this climate proofing tool or climate proofing manual. We plan to disseminate it in the coming 2 weeks. We didn't, of course, use this tool during the construction of Rosiris Dam or during the GERD, but anyone can follow the guidance and the steps of this manual and to implement and to check also the climate risk on these different infrastructures. If you want to check on Rosiris Dam, for example, as you said, or in Sinnar or any other like large infrastructure, you can use like the methods and the guidance in this climate proofing and to implement that in any like large infrastructure. Thank you very much, all our panelists. Now we are moving to the last session. It is a panel discussion. It will be led by Dr. Mohammed Bashir from University of Toronto. Dr. Mohammed Bashir, the floor is yours. He will lead us during this final session of panel discussion. Thank you very much. Also allow me to thank Dr. Mohammed Bashir. He was actively participating even in the past Nile Basin Development Forums, and he is now in Toronto, and I think maybe it is also midnight there or also around 1 a.m., same like Dr. Kevin, but you are still supporting us during this difficult time also in your side. Thank you. The floor is yours, Dr. Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Mudassir, and thank you to all presenters. I'm actually talking to you from Berlin, Germany, so it's not as bad as Kevin's case. So I'm awake and I have a lot of energy. So yeah, thanks a lot all presenters for the excellent presentations. Really a lot of intellectual content there, different methods for assessing the impacts of climate change, looking at disasters for different regions on different scales, using different kinds of data, and yeah, so lots of food for thought. I'm going to jump directly into the discussion in the interest of time, so that we can cover many topics. I would like to start with Dr. Kevin Wheeler and perhaps pose a few questions. I mean, your presentation really showed the importance of having a coordination mechanism to deal with floods in the Nile Basin, especially with infrastructure development and the risks and opportunities that they can bring. My question to you is a little bit on how to come up with such an operation, a flood operation center in the Nile Basin, and institutionally, I mean, also looking at your previous experience, on which level should such a flood operation center be implemented? Should it be on a dam operator level, or should it be a little bit higher, given the politics in the Nile? If you could tell us a little bit more about these aspects from your previous experience, that would be great. Thank you.
Certainly, yeah. It's important that dam operators can talk to dam operators. That's absolutely critical. The technical people during a situation like this, they don't have time to go through the channels and deal with the political aspects. They need to have that clearance beforehand to have that communication. When hours are what's at stake, and so it's obviously challenged in a situation where there are political borders and there's disagreements. But those technical safety issues have to supersede those disagreements, or else the wedge could be driven deeper. Where those exist, of course, we have the opportunity to have more virtual communication now, but also we have to think about during some of those major flood events, will the communication be upheld? Will there be any disruptions of communication? So there has to be redundancy in these systems if you're going to have online systems. In the example that I gave of the Lower Colorado River Authority, there's actually a dedicated room for flood operations, dedicated room or building that people will go into and work in throughout that time period. So that would be the ideal situation would be to have representatives of the different dam operators in person, able to talk to each other and see the same screens and understand the information that potentially could be shared electronically, but has to be very much real time to do that. So given the topography, or given the layout in Sudan, in the Nile Basin, a lot of that really, the major risks in terms of dam flooding comes along the Blue Nile, where the dams are very close to each other. So I would imagine something in Khartoum or in Wad Badani or something like that would potentially be some of the most realistic places where people could hopefully get to fairly readily. But yeah, but it's critical to have engineer to engineer conversations happening throughout those flooding periods.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really very informative response. In terms of tools and models, what kind of tools or models would you recommend for implementing such a flood coordination, management coordination mechanisms?
Oh, there's certainly a lot of tools out there that different countries have used. They have to be on a very fine resolution. The tool that I use on a planning basis is also used on a very fine resolution, down to, I think it's every hour operation or something like that, some of its finest resolution. But it has to be connected to SCADA systems, so information coming directly in from the dams and reservoirs, feeding into a database that can be accessed by these modeling tools that simulate how they would be responding. Army Corps of Engineers in the U.S. is often called upon for the major flood operations. Their tools from their HEC suite, I'm sure, are used. I don't use those ones in particular, but something that has fine temporal resolution and can represent the detailed operations of the gates would be required.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate your responses. Perhaps I would like to take it from there and move to Dr. Gebrsadik, who looked at some of the future impacts of climate change on the Blue Nile Basin specifically, and showed actually a wide range of uncertainty in terms of the impacts of climate change. I just would like to ask you, how should we deal with this uncertainty? What kind of approaches should we take in planning future infrastructure and also future infrastructure management plans?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So we have projected the future climate, and we found that there are so many uncertainties in terms of climate variables. And in our study, we try to see the causes of this uncertainty for projection. So even if the future projection is always uncertain, so there are so many things that we should consider. When it comes to the Blue Nile Basin or the Nile Basin, factors such as storage are key for utilizing water storage system to fill the gap of these uncertainties. When it comes to extreme conditions, the use of dams, as it was mentioned by Dr. Kevin, can be more beneficial to smoothen the extreme conditions and reduce their catastrophic impacts, such as flood and drought. So in this regard, recognizing the storage systems and also utilizing them for maximizing their benefits in terms of hydropower generation, as well as reducing these extreme fluctuations, are very crucial and need to be recognized. So uncertainties will always be there, but using these kind of factors can be more beneficial for the riparian countries as well as for all sectors in the basin. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Really great response there. I guess we always need to consider this uncertainty in order to come up with robust plans that work for worst case scenarios. But I guess also we need to have adaptive plans that we can change over time as we learn more and more about climate change. I guess one of the main input data that are needed for the methods that you described is hydrological data, and I would like to move here to Engineer Elise Usai. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, from DHI. And they'll talk a little bit about the hydrological model and how it can be used to provide inflow data, which is crucial for disaster risk management, especially floods. Since you mentioned that the tool is global, what kind of uncertainties come with this large scale, and if the tool is to be considered for a specific case study, what kind of quality control measures are needed before the tool can be used?
Thanks for your question. So yes, you're right that there is some uncertainties on this model, as we always have uncertainties on models. But here, like the fact that this model is based on physical properties make it more robust, because we have a kind of a ground validation of those parameters. And all parameters were also calibrated based on a global database of judging stations. So it helps to reduce those uncertainties. But also, for example, for this application on the Senegal Basin, before using directly the result from the model, we add some validation steps where we check the calibration of the model against some local judging station, which were not necessarily included in the global calibration. So if we want to use it locally, you will have to do one more steps of validation or calibration.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I guess my next question to you also is how to use the tool for looking at future climate change. Is it easily usable, for any user to bring in projection, look at how future climate change is going to impact the system?
Yes, it's very easy, because the only thing you need to change is the input rainfall or input evapotranspiration, and this can be calculated based on carbon emission scenarios. So since the model is very fast to compute, you can easily get results of several scenarios to compare the impact of climate change depending on carbon emission.
Yeah, thank you very much for the responses. Really important. I mean, input hydrological data is always important. I would like to just move quickly to Dr. Zarrouk's presentation about the new manual for climate proofing, which is, I think it's quite important. you know, I think, I mean, a key element for considering climate change is taking the uncertainty into consideration. What kind of recommendation does the manual provide to deal with climate change uncertainty when it comes to planning and managing water infrastructure?
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad, for this question. Of course, uncertainty. This is a very important part in different climate messages. When we want to give like any climate messages, we need to consider the uncertainty. Related to the uncertainty, what we did and the guidance in this one, we developed like what we call the suitable models for different sub-basins over the Nile Basin Initiative. We have 10 large sub-basins starting from Lake Victoria, Victoria Nile, Lake Albert, Bahr al-Jabal, Bahr Aqab Sobat, Bahr al-Ghazal, White Nile, Blue Nile, Takaziat Bara, and the main Nile. Those 10 large sub-basins, we try to find what are the best models in these sub-basins and recommendation of using the best models, because we already conducted that assignment and now it is better, and the recommendation is to use also those models in the climate proofing if you are working in that specific sub-basin. The second thing is to also avoid using one model or two models, and especially one model, because that model, it may be very wet model, it could be like a very dry model, it could be a hot model, it could be a cold model. So it is always advisable to use a set of ensemble members in the analysis. So use more models, and we provided like around 13 bias corrected RCMs. So it is always good to use the whole set of ensemble that we provide, and even more. If you can have access to more models, it is better to use also more models, and to refrain or to avoid using one model in your analysis. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much for this response. Yeah, I agree. It's key to use multiple models to explore the whole range. In a productive way, and that moves me to a question to the next presenter, Ms. Livia Peiser from FAO. So you presented a really good tool about water productivity, and you talked about the difficulty of measuring each of these tools. And again, the role that satellite data can play in estimating water productivity. Perhaps two questions to you. So first, how also to deal with the uncertainty that comes from the measurement of these parameters from satellites, and how that is dealt with in Vapor tool. And then how can we bring this tool? I mean, now it can provide a lot of information at very high spatial resolution, but how can we bring that down to advice to farmers in terms of what they can do? If you've got any recommendations in that direction, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you for the very relevant questions, both of them. The first one on accuracy is indeed something that the remote sensing community is always very aware of, because there are limitations to the quality of remote sensing data, starting with clouds, that can limit at times the accuracy of the observation. So the only way to deal with accuracy in general is to describe it well, and also to understand what type of accuracy are needed for the different uses. So we are not looking for the truth, assuming that it exists, but we are looking for fit for use data. So we need to understand what type of accuracy levels we need. So in that sense, we produce, we associate to our layers in the Vapor portal. We have quality layers that, for example, tell you how many days or decades of valid observations are happen between dates, so that you can, if for example 1 pixel has only 1 observation in 2 months, then you may not use it, and decide based on the application that you want to develop what is the threshold of accuracy that you're interested in. And we have guidance. The validation course that I mentioned is exactly meant to guide users in that process. And to the second question, that is also something that is very much associated to all remote sensing based tools. How do you move from the sky to the ground? And we do that partnering with local institutions. And so in all the countries, I think not all Nile Basin countries, but most of Nile Basin countries, we have projects, coordinators on the ground that we have agreements with research institutes. So for example, in Sudan, with the Hydraulic Research Center, where they use the data from the Vapor tool to discuss the findings with those that make a decision on the ground, scheme managers, farmers. So there's an intermediate level, let's say, of technical people that can understand the remote sensing data and transfer those to people on the ground, making sense of what those images are telling us. So yeah, that's very quickly the answer to your questions. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. That's really useful to know, and especially about recognize answer first and then starting to deal with it. So thank you very much for the response. Perhaps I also move to a similar kind of data that has been presented today by Mr. Miller Mashuri, looking at also spatial evaluation of droughts and drought risk, and in a very informative keynote speech. Thank you very much for that. So, I mean, you presented a very nice index, water requirement satisfaction index. I just want to ask you a little bit about that and how that is different from existing methods and the value that it can bring in terms of mitigation of disasters. And then again, I will pose to you the same questions that I previously posed. How can this kind of metrics and tools be used to actually benefit farmers on the ground in terms of mitigating disaster risks?
Yeah, thank you so much for those questions. But I wanted also to reflect a bit on the accuracy and the quality of data, because that's a very important concern. Because also when applying the water requirement satisfaction index, we do rely on global data sets. So the issue of quality accuracy is very important. For the case that I presented, it was very important to understand, because there are different global data sets for rainfall. So what we decided to do was trying to do more of a correlation between in situ data. We know that it's not well covered, and also different global data sets. For our case, we had the TAMSAT data set. We also have a rainfall estimate, and we also have ACT2 that is used for the African risk capacity. And we try to compare the accuracy of this with those data sets, and we are in a better position to decide on the data set to use. So that was the first element to address the accuracy. And we didn't stop there. We had also because my colleague from FAO was talking about moving from the sky to the ground. It was also very important to see how best we will address that question. And the other aspect is about blending data. Where we have station data, we blended global data sets so that we address the biasness that could come from the global data set. So that's the kind of contribution I wanted to add on the accuracy and quality of data, and also the remote sensing approach of it. The question on the issue for us, the benefits that come with this tool, is that we are positioning ourselves in near real time. As I said, we are monitoring days as they are progressing, and before even the end of the season, we are in a better position to know the outcome of that season. So knowing the outcome of that season before the harvest means a lot for either us who are in preparedness and response, but also farmers who are expecting the yield. Definitely, they will know that they are not expecting quite a lot if because the crop is having serious issues to do with availability of water. So that's one important aspect of the water requirement satisfaction index. The other aspect is that it doesn't consider just compared to, let's say, SPI, doesn't look at precipitation only. It's not the only factor that determine the quality of the season. As I explained that the water requirement satisfaction index looks at different parameters, looks at precipitation, yes, that's the starting point. Look at the evapotranspiration, look at the soil and the capacity of soil to hold water. It looks at the crop under cultivation, because all of these parameters when people starting planting, because it's not about having rainfall, it's having rainfall at specific period of time when that water is mostly needed for crop production and all that. So that's one benefit of using WRSI. I'm not a promoter of the tool, but I've been satisfied with the utilization, and because also it's positioned itself into more of a deterministic, near real time. Every 10 days you are getting data and you are positioning, projecting what will be the end of the season prior. So the benefit, the real benefit to farmer is that it will help farmer to deplete their assets. If you know that an outcome is coming, this outcome is happening. So you will try to put in place measures and all this. And I was framing this presentation in the context of the early warning for all, because now I think a colleague from the F and all that, we understand that you have this early warning for all initiative, which is the UN Secretary General initiative to have everybody covered by an early warning system by 2027. What does it mean? Is that we all appreciate the benefits, the return on investment from an early warning system, which is sometimes evaluated tenfold. So once you have this early warning system in place, you're in a position to understand what is the risk. And the risk here, I'm talking about the hazard itself, the exposure, the vulnerability, the capacities. You are in a position to monitor the outcome of the season, the event. You're in a position to communicate to the farmer and to disseminate the relevant information. And you're in a position to prepare the response on time, because response is one thing, but responding on time will make the difference. I think we are in a better position to address some of these issues. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your reflection there. Definitely agree with you that risk should be looked at, given all its components, from hazard to exposure to sensitivity, and then looking at the impacts as well. I would like to move to Dr. Magdalene Hagis Taher, move a little bit to the north of the, to Norway. You've shown a very wonderful picture of how floods can be managed, and then contrasted that with how bad things can be in countries where you don't have flood management systems. Perhaps I would like you to give us a few lessons and talk to us a little bit about what's done in Norway and what is a low-hanging fruit from your experience in Norway that can be transferred to the Nile Basin to improve disaster risk mitigation in terms of floods and droughts.
Thank you. My background is operational. I work in a hydropower company called Craft, and that's or actually Europe's largest generator of hydropower. I've been working here for 13 years, and what is very interesting is that this question of management, like I have shown in my presentation, the climate change is happening. The question is how to manage climate change. There are about 256 hydropower plants that are under this company, mostly in Norway and Sweden. and some of them are in other places as well in Europe, like in Albania. Very importantly, I will focus on the management of the Nordic market, which is Norway, Sweden, where I work, the department where I work. And that is this cascade system is very, very important. The management, the communication, most importantly, the communication between upstream and downstream within the same country is continual. All the time, the monitoring is continual and the communication is continual. So therefore, this capability of hazard management and flood management is in place at all times, 24/7. Most interestingly, in a question whereby transboundary management, again, two things are in place: communication and institutionalization. The issue is not political, and it's not cultural, and it's not emotional. It is only scientific and management and engineering question and operational question. So therefore, very many times the aquifers are across the two countries, across like national boundaries, whereby we really don't talk to any politician whatsoever. We just talk to the authorities of water, the authorities of energy, and that is the main I think that is the core of the success of the Scandinavian model. This ability of institutionalization, everything is on the institution, and to separate matters from culture and politics and so on. And this is the core success of this kind of management of the system. You manage a watershed. You don't manage a watershed in Ethiopia and another one in the Sudan. You manage the whole watershed. Yeah, so that's my point.
No, thank you very much. Really, this is a good way to end the discussion, and it ties very nicely to the remarks of Dr. Wheeler that started with the need for having that institutional setup where operators can actually talk to each other and in a more efficient way. Thank you all for all your for this very useful discussion. I enjoyed a lot and learned a lot from you, and I would like to hand it over back to Dr. Zarour.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Bashir, for this excellent moderation for this panel discussion. I would like to thank also our panelists here also for their outstanding response, and also I would like to thank them for the excellent and informative presentations today. I think we are lucky today. We managed to have very informative presentations this morning. Thank you, Mr. Mashouri. Also, thank you, Dr. Gebrtsadik and Dr. Magdalene, and also Dr. Elise, and also Dr. Livia, and Dr. Kevin. Thank you again very much. And thank you, Dr. Mohammed Bashir. I would like to thank also our participant also for joining us in this important forum, and also for posing questions to our panelists. And for our panelists also, thank you for the good response to these questions. Yes, maybe for our panelists, can you open your camera? We would like to take just a photo, for a group photo for the panelists. Yes, Dr. Kevin, if you are around, you can also open your camera. Yes. Also, I would like to advertise the afternoon session. We have a session at 2 p.m. about management of flood emergencies. This is also an interesting session. So kindly also join us during that session for our participants who attended also this morning session. Patrick, maybe you can confirm if you took the photo. Thank you. Thank you very much, our panelists, and have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Time well used.